Okay, this is Final Authority number 9. And the title of this one is A Satanic Interpretation. It's a follow-up also of the Satanic translation. And as I mentioned, that sometimes people will put sensational titles to draw attention to a video and then don't even mention the title or just give lip service toward the title. Yes, it is true that most pastors, professors, interpret the Bible like Satan does. They're not reading Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible, but they interpret the Bible, like Satan. And in fact, most of them, the vast majority of them, are reading from Satanic translations, which you'll have to go through the previous video, Final Authority number 8, in order to understand what is said on that. In Luke chapter 4, we have the temptation of Jesus Christ. In that temptation, we discover a satanic translation. Not only that, but we also discover satanic interpretations, how he interprets the Bible itself. There are 2 times in the Bible where Satan is in action, where the Bible gives a play-by-play account of his attempt to deceive. The first one is in Genesis 3 with the first Adam at the beginning of the Old Testament. The second account is in Luke chapter 4 with the last Adam. These 2 play-by-play accounts give the sincere Bible believer 2 lines of defense against deception. Like in football, you got the linemen, middle linebackers, and the safety. So they got 3 lines of defense, but we only need 2 lines of defense. And the first line of defense discovered in Genesis chapter 3 is that if you believe the 7 statements that were given previously, the 7 statements for the point of agreement, the only Bible, the only one that will match all 7 of the ingredients, including number 7, will be the King James Bible, the authorized 1611 King James Bible. So the Bible is the final authority for all matters of faith and practice. So in Genesis chapter 3, we discover our first line of defense is be careful, be alert, be diligent, be vigilant to take notice that a person doesn't add, subtract, or change a word or words of the Bible that is God's final authority for today. That's the first line of defense. Now, I can give many, many examples, but I'm not going to give the examples right now. You might go through the 7 steps to learn the scriptures around middle of that where you get into studying, it gets into that idea. Now in this account, when I say most pastors, professors, reverendes, interpret the Bible like Satan. They follow a satanic translation. Why? Is that sensational or is that reality? That's reality. Now our example is the play-by-play account in Luke chapter 4. With the last Adam. In Luke chapter 4, the temptations run like this. I'm just going to look at the temptations themselves because we want to see the play-by-play account here. Where he says to Jesus in Luke 4:3, "If thou be the Son of God, command this stone that it be made bread." Of course, you can see that he's casting doubt, if, but he's telling him to turn stone into bread. Is that a sin? He turned water to wine, new wine in particular, grape juice. But is that a sin for the Creator to change the elements of a stone into bread? No, it would not be a sin. Not at all. In the second temptation, according to Luke chapter 4, as far as it's recorded, Satan, the devil, showed Jesus all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. Now, we can play around with that for a little while, have a little fun with that one, but we'll sidestep that. And the devil said unto him, all this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will I give it, if thou therefore wilt worship me, and all shall be thine. Okay, well, did the devil have the authority to do that? Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. He's delegated that authority. Obviously, the sin would be to worship the devil, but is it a sin for Jesus Christ to have all the power and the glory of the world kingdoms? He's going to have it someday. He's going to have it someday. Sooner the better. But there's actually no sin in that in itself. Okay, in the third temptation, he set him on a pinnacle of the temple. Okay, and said unto him, if thou be the Son of God, okay, casting doubt, cast thyself down from hence, okay, and then he gave a satanic translation. So, if Jesus jumped off of the pinnacle of the temple, being the creator of the natural laws, where he can defy the law of density where if something is more dense in the molecules than air, then it goes down. If it's less dense than air, like smoke and helium, it goes up. So Jesus could actually step off the side of the temple and be floating there like he walked on water. In all three temptations here, there's actually no sin involved except for, the worshiping and things like that. But the reward offered, the benefit offered, okay, is not sinful. So what is going on here? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. The first and the third one are kind of tough to, really figure it out. So you go to the middle one where Jesus is given the offer of all the world kingdoms. So that will give us in line with the other two. Satan is offering the benefits of the second coming without fulfilling the first coming of the suffering Savior. In other words, Satan is taking a truth or an idea or a truth of another age and trying to pull it back to the first coming. Okay, it's like if your engine is out of time, the engine will run rough. But if your engine jumps time, it's not going to run. Where in Ecclesiastes 3, it says everything is beautiful in his time. So there are millennial doctrines here that the devil is trying to pull back to the first coming. What is he doing? He is purposely failing to rightly divide the word of truth. Now that is the second line of deception in the New Testament, because we have now more people involved, not just Jews and Gentiles. Now we have born-again believers or the church of God. The Apostle Paul is the apostle to the Gentiles who are born again. When you get born again, you're neither Jew nor Greek. And so this is now we got to step into rightly dividing the word of truth. 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 15 says, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Okay, when the Jehovah Witness with their New World Translation knocks on your door and tries to tell you about the kingdom, the earthly kingdom of Jesus, they're not lying about the kingdom. What they're lying about is how one gets there. They have to work their way. So they're taking a truth of the millennium, pulling it back to the church age, jump time, and it becomes a heresy. It's a satanic interpretation. So when the water dog tries to take the water of Acts 2 and tries to pull it into the New Testament for the born-again believer, he is following a satanic translation. When a fundamentalist tries to say, oh, they get righteousness the same way in the Old Testament and the New Testament, he is following a satanic interpretation. When the health and wealth guys on TV are trying to pull Old Testament doctrines of the promise of health and wealth and the death of your enemies, pulling it to a New Testament believer, he is following a satanic interpretation. When the tongue speakers try to get a born-again believer in this age, the church age, after tongues have ceased, according to 1 Corinthians 13, and they try to get you to say Hashan Tai Tai Botai, they are following a satanic interpretation. They are failing to rightly divide the word of truth. When a Christian in this age thinks that they're obeying the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, and the annual Sabbath, and the Jewish customs, they are following a satanic interpretation because those are signs between God and Israel. When a born-again believer, a Christian in this age, actually foolishly thinks that they're Israel, they are following a satanic interpretation. Now, if my premise is valid here in Luke chapter 4, a satanic interpretation takes a truth of another age and tries to pull it into the age it wasn't intended in a failure to rightly divide a word of truth. Okay, then we should have another witness. Now, as you keep reading down Luke chapter 4, you'll see in verse 16 that Jesus comes to Nazareth. That's his hometown area. He goes to the local synagogue. He is going to teach in the synagogue. Somebody gives him the book of the prophet Isaiah. Okay, and then he opens it up to a certain location. He opens it up to Isaiah 61, verse 1 and 2. Okay, and then he reads this portion. In Luke 4, verse 18, you will see that that is the New Testament translation of the Old Testament, Isaiah 61, verse 1. We can learn some things out of there, but I'm going to sidestep those for now. And then in Luke 4:19, Jesus said to preach the acceptable year of the Lord, period. He closed the book. Now, when you compare that to Isaiah 61, verse 2, he only read half of the verse. In Isaiah 61, verse 2, you have I think it's a comma. I'm bringing it up here. You have a comma in verse 2. Jesus does not read the entire passage. And the reason why he didn't read the entire passage is that he could not have said, as he said in Luke 4:21, this day is this scripture fulfilled in your ears. He could not have said that if he would have completed verse 2. Now, I understand that the originals, which you've never seen, didn't have the English grammatical punctuation points, semicolon, colon, period, comma. Okay, where it says in Isaiah 61:2, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. That's where Jesus stopped. If he would have read the next phrase, and in fact the rest of the sentence, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all that mourn, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, and the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. After the word Lord, where Jesus stopped, the rest of the sentence is all about the second coming. Jesus Christ is the originator of rightly dividing the word of truth. He is the first one to demonstrate how to rightly divide between the first and second coming. Jesus Christ is the originator of that. And then Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:15, study. Well, you need to look at that verse in every new Bible because they take the word study out. It's gone. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing. Rightly dividing, dividing in itself is gone in the vast majority of them. Rightly dividing the word of truth. Now, how do we rightly divide? It's by the doctrines of the Bible, where there are Jewish doctrines, there are doctrines for Gentiles, there are doctrines for Christians. And some of these doctrines are limited to a specific time. There are some principles in the Bible that are universal, but then there are some that with time we have progressive revelation. And we got to learn to rightly divide the word of truth. And that is how one becomes approved of God. Now, I go in great detail of that under the 7 steps. Step number 4, how to study. So this is why, as I said in a previous video on number 8, most Christians read from Satanic translations as revealed in Luke 4, verse 11 and 12, 10 and 11. And also most Christians, most pastors, most professors, most reverendes, most teachers of the Bible teach from a satanic interpretation when they fail to rightly divide the word of truth.